Something just happened in the Orthodox world that should alarm every serious Christian. A hierarch of Constantinople publicly stated that his patriarchate holds the highest authority in the Orthodox Church. That's not a diplomatic phrase. That's not ceremonial language. That's not simply historical precedence. This is a claim about who governs the Church of Christ. And if that statement is true, then the structure of Orthodoxy, as it's existed for 2,000 years, has fundamentally changed. So today, we're going to go ahead and examine that claim, not with anger, not with personalities, and not with internet polemics, but with the fathers, the canons, and the structure of the Church itself. If you care about preserving Orthodox faith and tradition in a time of confusion, subscribe and stand with this channel. This is Spiritual Frontlines, guys. I'm your host, Marco, and this is where we defend the Church as the Fathers handed it down. Let's establish the facts. According to a report from the Union of Orthodox Journalists, Archbishop Elpidophoros of the Patriarchate of Constantinople stated that the Ecumenical Patriarchate holds the highest authority in the Orthodox Church. He clarified that this authority, it's not identical to Roman papacy, but he argued that Constantinople possesses a unique level of responsibility and authority derived from the canons, including matters such as granting autocephaly. So, this is not a rumor. This is not speculation. This is a publicly reported statement describing Constantinople as holding the highest authority in Orthodoxy. That wording is the issue. Because once you move from first in honor to highest authority, you're no longer talking about precedence. You're talking about jurisdiction. You're talking about governance, and you're talking about who rules. And that takes us into the nature of the Church itself. This is not about personality. This is not about rivalry. This is about politics. This is about ecclesiology and what the Church actually is, right? Because if one see holds the highest authority, then authority no longer rests primarily in synods. The equality of bishops is redefined. Local churches no longer possess the fullness of ecclesial life, independently, right? And conciliarity becomes secondary. See, this is the issue. That's not a minor administrative adjustment, guys. That's a structural redefinition of the Church. And no patriarchate has the authority to redefine the nature of the Church, period. End of story. The Orthodox Church has no universal bishop, no supreme earthly head, no throne governing all others. The head of the Church is Christ himself. Authority is exercised through councils of bishops, and Apostolic Canon 34 clearly states, it says, the bishops of every nation must acknowledge the first among them, but neither let them do anything without the consent of all. This canon establishes order, but it also limits power. The first exists, but he's not above the synod, guys. He coordinates. He doesn't dominate. And so we need to talk about when honor becomes supremacy, right? If one see possesses universal appellate authority, the ability to intervene anywhere, power to define legitimacy, and unilateral authority to grant or revoke ecclesial status, that's no longer primacy. That's supremacy. And supremacy in church structure is the defining characteristics of the papal system. Orthodoxy rejected that model. St. Mark of Ephesus didn't resist Rome so that a new Rome could arise in Eastern form from the Greeks, right? And so what did the fathers say about episcopal authority? Well, St. Cyprian of Carthage wrote, the episcopate is one, each part of which is held by each one for the whole. None of us sets himself up as bishop of bishops. He explicitly rejects hierarchical domination among bishops. St. Ignatius of Antioch wrote, where the bishop is, there is the church. Each local Eucharistic community gathered around its bishop is fully the church, not a branch of a central administration. St. Nicodemus the Hagarite, explaining in Apostolic Canon 34, shows that, and I'm going to quote him, he says, first exists for unity and order, not monarchy. The canon protects the church from centralization. That's the whole point. And by the way, the ecumenical councils prove that structure. When heresy arose, the church, it didn't turn to a supreme bishop. It convened councils. The very existence of ecumenical councils proves the church's authority is conciliar, not some supremacist ideology or papal supremacy or any of that stuff. And so, this pattern obviously happened before, and that's with the papal system, right? The papal system, it didn't appear overnight. It developed through language shifts. First came honor, then then expanded privileges, then appellate claims, then universal oversight. The vocabulary changed until a bishop of honor became a bishop of supremacy, basically. And the arguments, all the arguments sounded familiar, right? Not supremacy, just responsibility. Not control, just care for unity. Not authority over others, just a special role. But structurally, the result was the same. Canon 28 of Chalcedon, we need to talk about that, because Canon 28 gives Constantinople equal privileges to Rome because it was the imperial capital. It didn't grant universal jurisdiction. Privileges of honor do not equal supremacy. They never did. And so why that language shift matters is super, super important, right? Because heresy often begins with redefinition. Primacy becomes leadership, leadership becomes oversight, oversight becomes authority. Every single time. Phrases like highest authority, it signals structural change. And you have to understand, why Orthodoxy actually survived all these empires throughout history for the last 2,000 years. Super important. Why did it survive? Because Orthodoxy survived Rome's fall, right? They survived Islam and communism because authority was never centralized in one throne. That decentralization is the resilience. That's what saved the church, because we're decentralized. If one head falls, there's another one standing that preserves the faith every single time. And that's why it's lasted 2,000 years. And so the Orthodox response here is it needs to be sharp. It needs to be very firm, because I guess we need to remind these guys, who they actually work for. His name's Jesus Christ. But, we don't reject Constantinople's honor here. But what we do is we reject any theology that turns honor into supremacy. Christ is the head. Bishops are equal in grace. Councils govern the church. That's orthodoxy. That's what orthodoxy always was for the last 2,000 years. If this helped you guys understand what orthodoxy really is, stand with us. Subscribe, share, comment. Make sure you comment Christ is the head of the church in the comments. I want to see that one this time. And, we're living in a time when the structure of the church is obviously being tested. This is Spiritual Frontlines. Stay armed, stay sober, and remember, Christ is king, Christ is head, and Christ is enough.